Have you ever had a lug nut that absolutely would not move? When I was younger, I was trying to change a tire, and somebody had apparently tightened those lug nuts with the strength of an angry gorilla. I pulled, I pushed, I bounced on the tire iron, and nothing. Then I slid a piece of pipe over the handle, made it longer, and the nut broke loose almost effortlessly. I didn't get stronger, I got leverage. And that may be exactly what your company is missing. This is the Contractor Success Forum. I'm Wade Carpenter with Carpenter and Stephen alongside Stephen Brown with McDaniel Whitley Bonding and Insurance. Stephen, I know many of our listeners are some of the hardest working people on the planet. Yet sometimes it seems they just can't break that glass ceiling that keeps holding them back. You ever see that in business?
I think your analogy to leverage and using that leverage to get that lug, did you heat that nut up with the blowtorch first? Slipping that pipe at the end and giving yourself extra leverage. How many people haven't done that on a stuck water main valve at their house? Leverage is a great concept for us to talk about because here we're talking about construction company growth, right? How are you going to use leverage in describing that?
Yeah, I see so many contractors start off as a one-man band. Maybe they work for a great company and they know construction inside and out. And they had the infrastructure behind them, and they jump out in business and they're having to wear all the hats. They're on the job all day and doing paperwork all night, estimates and bids and trying to keep up with accounting. And they run themselves ragged and they never feel like they're getting anywhere. So that's what I'm talking about.
It's a fact of life. You want to start a new construction company and you're going to be wearing a lot of hats before you start generating the profits to afford the extra support you need.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not just when you start up, it's a progression. I look at my own self. I started off like 26 years ago. And even though I knew what I was doing and I knew how to run all these different hats, I didn't actually think about, okay, how do I get leverage? This is some of the problems I've seen in contractors as well. Is it's taken me a while to I don't want to turn loose a payroll. I don't want them seeing the books or stuff like that. And for a contractor, being that one man band gets in the way of your growth. That's where I'm wanting to go with this. How do we get that leverage so we can move beyond this one man band, basically that cycle that we're in sometimes?
It's interesting you say that. On a side note about payroll, I read yesterday about a lot of younger folks are going out there in social media and advertising what they're getting paid. I know that's a big no-no in a lot of organizations. You start comparing salaries, you're going to get fired. Anyway, I didn't mean to take us off track. Go ahead, Wade.
It's just a trap. A contractor, they land some more work, and what they feel like, okay, I got to get to this point. They work harder. And instead of feeling like they're getting successful, they spend their nights and evenings and they think that just brute force, just like that, just keep pounding on that tire iron is going to eventually break it free. It's a tough thing to do. And so, when you're trying to wear all these hats, it seems like you can't ever get flowing.
So in your analogy, the nut is the business that you're trying to grow. And the person putting the force on the nut with the lever is the construction company owner. And you can do it the hard way or you can do it the easy way with some leverage.
the problem is, as I said in the intro, contractors are some of the hardest working people I've ever met. Maybe you increase your revenue, but you're still killing yourself. And hard work may get you started, but it does not scale if you don't look at ways to get leverage. And that's my point is there's a lot of different ways to talk about leverage. It may be essential that you're bootstrapping everything and you're just working nights and weekends and all that stuff, but it can't be sustainable. A lot of the owners are the most important people. And if you can't take a vacation, if you can't stop and your business stops, that's a problem. There is some kind of ceiling on how much one person can do. A lot of times growth will compound some of that stuff. We talk about it all the time, the cash flow issues and more debt and all that stuff. If you're on a job site, you're trying to carry bricks one by one and you don't have a wheelbarrow, that's going to take a lot more trips.
And a lot of times with a new construction company owner, you can't see the forest for the trees. You're so tired and you're working so hard. You're wearing so many hats. I would definitely say, why not just start thinking about who you need and what you need from a leverage standpoint before you get started? And are you taking the time to do that now?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't. I guess to get beyond that, how do we start finding the time, the leverage? I guess what I would say is First, got to figure out, identify those things, the constraints that are holding a business owner back. I know I preach constraint theory all the time, but I truly believe in it. So every company, no matter what level they're at, they have something limiting that next stage of growth. And finding that is the first step, I would say.
Okay.
Whether it is the cash flow or estimating, or maybe you're doing all the project management yourself, the administrative capacity, the accounting side, we put that on the back burner. We wish we had better job costing, but we don't really take the time to do that, or we don't have the capacity in place to do it. We don't have the funds to go hire some $150,000 CFO. That's why a lot of times we come in where we can do that 30 to 50% cheaper, give you a proper back office, and give you some leverage. I know that sounds self-serving, but it's just one example of what is the point that you need to work on to move forward. So I think it's finding that bottleneck first.
Finding that bottleneck, I guess, is kind of hard if you are that bottleneck. Trying to figure out what it is that's slowing down your growth and speeding up your growth, what's causing you the most stress. One thing I see contractors all the time, they can't define stress because each person's level of stress is different and how they control that stress. But to me, stress is not worrying about things that you shouldn't be controlling. It's using leverage to get through the situation in a better way, a smarter way. Yeah, and that expression that you can work harder or you can work smarter. Are you working smarter? Are you working the smartest way you can work? And who could tell you that? Beside maybe your accountant, your bonding agent, your other financial board of directors, who would you trust to tell you that? Your spouse? Your partner, if you have a partner, of course.
Yeah, I see it all the time. A contractor has run several multi-million dollar jobs when they had the team behind them. And it's just like a garden hose. You could have all capacity, the water pressure, but you got a kink in the line. Only so much can flow through that hose when you got the kink. And that's where, how do we get past those constraints that are holding them back?
How do we?
Where I started going with this was, can we buy back the owner's time? If they could be running bigger jobs, or no, how do we buy that time back? There's a lot of ways we can do that. It's not just hiring people. I want to maybe think about some of those things that we're talking about here. Maybe it's hiring the right person, or we just did one on joint ventures. Maybe we are doing parts of a job we shouldn't be doing. And maybe that's joint venture with somebody. Maybe the owner is really good at reconciling their own bank account, but maybe they shouldn't be reconciling their bank account. So that's where I talk to a lot of times. What could you do with another couple of hours? If we recover this time, could you reinvest in sales? Could you reinvest in leadership and teaching your project managers to run a project like you would run it? Make some sense?
Absolutely.
A lot of times we all forget, yeah, we're the owner of the team, but they should be the quarterback and they should be calling the plays. They shouldn't be the one just saying, I'm going to run the ball myself all the time. They got to remember they got somebody to pass to, they got somebody to hand off to. Anyway, some other examples, if you got the owner chasing down receipts or entering bills, running their payroll, reconciling, how can we delegate some of these tasks? Maybe they didn't want anybody seeing their credit card bill, whatever. I see that kind of stuff. How can we delegate stuff like that to get relief? Delegating responsibility. Maybe you really wanted to make sure that invoice was right, but are you the one that has to send it out the door?
Well, that makes sense. What about, say, you've got a contract you're considering and you want to send it to your attorney? Why not, if you subscribe to a closed AI system, couldn't you scan that contract and let AI look for certain things that you tell it to look for? For example, pay provisions and the hold harmless language. And then you fine tune that before you send it to your attorney. So your attorney, you're using AI to do some heavy lifting for you and save you some money. Also, the educational curve. What a great curve you have on education by having AI specifically look for the things that you have questions about. But when you're talking about delegating, you need people and you need resources. First thing that popped into my mind too is utilizing, say, Carpenter and Company CPAs to help get your books in order and help you do the accounting on this particular project that's killing you. Help you automate it. Sometimes you need an expert to advise you on how to do that.
We talked about that with the expertise, whether it's accounting, but I've also seen people like, okay, they've spent a whole bunch of time figuring out how to do contractor licensing in multiple states. when there are actually specialists out there that will walk you through the process and take care of a lot of the points there and making sure I've seen outsourced project management, stuff like that. As you pointed out, getting expertise or leverage can be whether it's your hiring labor or we're going to get to it in a minute. AI. I think AI is another great way of getting leverage. You don't build your own power plant because you need electricity. How do we use some of that other capacity? Somebody outsourcing the payroll, a payroll company, that kind of stuff. So again, real leverage is not just somebody that does the bookkeeping. It's really more about stop being the back office, stop holding everybody up. And you have to be there every Friday to cut checks and sign checks and do all that. And then let's think about financial leverage. What does that mean to you? I know I'm putting you on the spot here. One of the things that holds people back, we talk about all the time, is cash flow. What does financial leverage mean to you?
Negotiating the best terms for getting paid in a way that minimizes your risk and helps you make the most money.
Yeah, and like I said, I still go back to cash flow and finding the right jobs and that kind of stuff. But we recently did that episode, which I think we called it Cash Flow as a Weapon. Do we have to accept the terms or can we I don't want to say manipulate, but can we negotiate
Negotiate.
something? Yeah. Sorry, wrong choice of terms. But if you don't have the cash, maybe you're not at the point of like being able to go get a line of credit or whatever it is, or maybe you should be taking extra time to see if maybe you're 3 years in business, maybe the bank will start talking to you now about that. That's just a sort of a rule of thumb that
There were some great ideas on that podcast, Wade, about how to go back and negotiate terms. If you're stressed and you're currently in a situation that's not working for you, what could you go back to the owner to negotiate in order to take some of that stress off?
I enjoyed that episode actually myself. It's like stop letting it happen to you and thinking outside the box. But cash is that, I guess I'd say call it shock absorber. It's like, okay, if you have a downturn, whatever, it's not just people, it's having the leverage on the cash to do what you need. I hate to say having the cash to go buy another excavator. That's not the point. But when you do have extra cash in reserve, I preach profit first all the time. But when you have extra cash, you can sometimes negotiate better terms where, okay, we'll pay you within 15 days if you will cut us a break on the prices, those kind of things. But turn that around, this contractor that doesn't have cash leverage, they have to accept these poor contract terms. Heaven forbid they get in one of these like pay by the week things that can kill a contractor. But they end up taking low margin work because they have to keep the cash flowing and they'll just keep going. And it's a cycle. And then there are things like make rushed hiring decisions at the last minute when they need somebody and they just have to do it because they don't have the cash to get somebody onboarded properly to do the project management or take the estimating off that owner.
Great points, Wade.
All right, here's some other ideas. And some of these go into AI and that kind of stuff. Back when I started my business, the E-Myth Revisited, Michael Gerber, it still resonates in my mind. But when you got to process and systematize things, it makes the wheels turn so much easier. If there is something that you do all the time, that is a process that you can leverage. That's another way to get leverage. A lot of times they lose time by basically solving these recurring problems as if they were new. Maybe you do it every few months, but you never wrote it down and then you have to relearn it, those kind of things. If you have these processes, it reduces the number of decisions you have to make. It allows you to be able to pass this off to somebody else. The goal is consistency, not you being a bureaucrat. The goal is, okay, you don't want to turn this loose because you're the only one that can do it. That's the only way you start to build that. Obviously, if you got it documented, whether you're handing it to a person or AI or whatever, that's another part of leverage.
Yeah, I certainly understand. If I share with everybody what I know and how I do it, I'm losing power, my power to make money because I'm better than someone else. And at the same time, you're saying I got to give up some of that control. I've got to give it up to move forward. And how you manage it, are you even thinking that way right now?
That's some things I'm actually doing right now in my business. But the standard job kickoff for a contractor is exactly like something that we're trying to refine when we have a new client come on board. We've got a process But a lot of times I was the one steering that process and I got to know the prospect and that kind of stuff. But for the team to take that off my plate, what we did was actually split the team into 5 different pods and said, okay, this is part one, part two, part three. Because our onboarding is a lot more involved than, say, a bookkeeper. But for me to get out of that, I had to say, okay, this is what I do, but also wanted the team to say, what are the parts that you run into? So I actually stepped out of that and I assigned everybody on the team to be on one of these pods and say, okay, you walk through all this stuff without me. And I'm finding blind spots that is second nature to me, but they didn't know. Whether it's your standard job kickoff or your change orders or however you do weekly billing or onboarding a new employee, those kind of things.
Well, you're making your organization stronger, Wade, because you're not that kink in the hose and the stress involved with onboarding, for example, a new employee. As others are seeing, as they're educating and they're learning more about the way you think, the whole organization's running better, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is one of the great steps to using technology and AI. That's where I wanted to take this. Yeah, you can hire somebody, but if you got these processes in place, whether you can train a person or AI can do some amazing things now to reduce your work and replicate what you do. A lot of people are still playing with AI and thinking ChatGPT, and I just put something in ChatGPT and answer a question. That doesn't move the ball forward. For years, I've studied how do I automate things. There's Zapier, and then there's robotic process automation, and then Make.com and N8N. And now it's almost stupid simple to say GPT or Claude, this is what I do. How can you help me do that? I do the same thing with the processes. I will sit there and dictate this is my processes and have ChatGPT just say, ask me some questions. How do I do a bid? And if I'm not clear, just continually grill me on this so that this is my estimation process. This is how I bid and look up prices. And so that's the kind of thing that I think a contractor, that's how they get the leverage to start moving beyond themselves and moving beyond the promise of AI doing all this stuff and thinking ChatGPT isn't really doing anything more than it ever did. Is just answering my questions a little faster.
I think that's great. When you talking about how you're using AI to push you to define your steps, how you do things, you're using it as a source to refine what you're thinking in your process. I think about you could use AI also as a customer relationship management tool because how many times are you afraid to really survey your customers to see what they really think about you and your team? You could use AI, the same source, pushing those questions and trying to make it better before you start really getting into wanting to know how your customers think you're handling their business.
Oh, I think that's a great point. Honestly, AI is great. Like you said, capturing the knowledge, eliminating some of the repetitive things we do. It definitely can help a smaller team, but this is just a perfect example of what AI can't really do is the human element. And that's where I keep preaching to my team, like, well, yeah, you can use AI all day long and maybe it's transactional stuff, but we're using AI to say, okay, we need to follow up. We need to make sure things are done right. And so to the extent you can like project management, taking this to the construction world, we're trying to say, how can we give better service and that kind of stuff. For our contractors, okay, did we follow up with the sub? Those kind of things. And some of that probably could be done. Does the material supplier care if a bot sent out an email saying, what's the status of this order? I don't think so.
No. But I tell you what really ticks people off and ticks me off too is when AI pretends to be human. As a human, I think we'll fight that forever. What a horrible business model it is to get a phone call that says, "Hey, Stephen, I'm your AI assistant. Hey, my name's Alice. How you doing? Hey, listen, I'm glad I caught you. How things going? Oh, I'm an AI assistant." And then I'm just hanging up and I'm like, gosh, they tried to sucker me again.
Oh, and I totally agree. And that's precisely why I said the human element is what we're preaching. And we are not going to be doing bots replying to our clients.
Right.
But it's
Right.
one thing like,
You cannot solve a problem in the field with AI. It's experience that's going to get the job done. Who knows? AI might help. It might have a solution, just like YouTube, right? I'll never forget the first time I changed a fuel pump on my car that was located behind my back seat from a YouTube video. Did not tell me to depressurize the system before I unhooked
oh,
the
Lord.
shot gas all inside the car and in my face. And I was like, okay. Then I looked at another YouTube later and it's like, Hey, by the way, don't forget to depressurize. Okay, so first of all, there's experience involved. But I like your points about leverage and using AI weight, and it seems so important to me. And I tell the folks in my office, no matter how hard you work, whatever you do, you can do something better. You can do something more efficiently, and you can provide more service to your customers. That's what you can do better than AI. That's what humans can always do better than AI, because we have that divine spark that allows us to do things that AI can't do.
As we said, AI is a great power tool, but it's only useful when you know what you're building. We could do a whole episode on this, obviously, leveraging it beyond just asking it questions. But how do we get beyond that kind of stuff? I think the point of this was, how do we get leverage in our business? How do we get beyond ourselves? Because so many people have been chasing AI. Came out like November 22 when ChatGPT started rolling out. And maybe you've been searching for that forever, but you're still in this problem of you don't have leverage. And to get there, I think it's not one particular thing. You got to combine all these levers we're talking about, because there's people on the YouTube saying all the time that it's like, okay, I've got a one man business. AI does everything. I think a lot of that is hype. And unless you're selling something on Etsy or something, I'm not sure that
Mhm.
works in construction. But, the point is no single form of leverage is enough. You got teams without systems, you got technology without clean process to go with it, you got growth without cash, you got cash without good management. The strongest businesses really combine all these things together: the piece of people, the processes, the technology, the expertise, the financial strength. That's how that flywheel starts turning. Basically, it may not happen overnight, but the more you leverage you get, the more it frees you up, the more that flywheel can turn a little faster. That's my points.
Great point. Great point.
Like I said, I know this one's getting a little longer, and there was a couple other points I was going to make, but I think you may find some things that fits and starts, and you may just like in the E-Myth. I keep going back to that book and the stories. The owner of the business hired somebody, and then that person left. They became so dependent on the person left. The point was they didn't have all the systems in place to do it. You got to combine all these things, and it may be fits and starts and setbacks along the way, but getting beyond you as the owner, that's the point. If you're ever going to scale this thing, you're ever going to take home the money you deserve, that's where I want you to take this to heart, maybe, and start thinking about getting leverage in the business. That was my point. What are your thoughts, takeaways?
Exactly yours. We want all our listeners to work smarter, not harder, and have some peace and joy in operating their business, to have a sense of accomplishment, of doing more than you thought you could do on your own with the help of others and other resources. These are great points, Wade. I hope our listeners enjoyed this. And I'm glad they took the time to listen.
Yeah, if you're still with us, we certainly appreciate it. And I know I felt like I could keep going. I'm sorry if this one went a little longer than normal, but I get passionate about talking about this because I see so many contractors that when they finally get past one hurdle, it's nice to see some of them take off and see how they did it. Somebody that studies business, I love to see that in a contractor. So if you're still with us, we appreciate you hanging out with us for a little while. And we do this every single week. We would appreciate it if you would like, share, subscribe, and share this with a contractor. If you have some thoughts about what we talked about, getting leverage, where you're struggling, what's holding you back, put them down in the comments below. We'd love to see your comments. We do this every single week. We will see you on the next show. Thanks.